Alright, like I said, I was going to go ahead and look up the answer. It was on my flash drive, which I wrote down. Whoops. And then I'm going to crash my laptop really quick, because that just seems like the most logical thing to do if you really think about it. Come on, you dumb thing. Ah, don't do this to me. Really? Okay. Let's try this again. One moment, we are having technical... Well, while I'm doing this, I'll answer the other question, which I had to go look up really quick, which is, what is your favorite soundtrack, or rather song, from Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim? Now, my favorite from Morrowind, I don't remember the name, unfortunately. Actually, I could look that up. I think about it. While I get to that... Oh, here it is. It's right here. Where is it? Peaceful Waters is the name of the song from Morrowind. It always just sort of resonates with me. And of course, the Morrowind theme itself, Morrowind, has a certain appeal to me. As far as Oblivion goes, again, I had to look this one up. That would be Dusk at the Market would be my favorite. Now, I don't have the Skyrim soundtrack handy, but the only song that actually really clicked with me in Skyrim was the one that plays over the trailers, basically. The take on Morrowind, the the barbarians singing song. I don't know what else to call that, to be completely honest with you, but that song was awesome. And this is starting to irritate me. I'm going to have to lose use of my mouse for a second in order to see if I can get this to acknowledge my flash drive. I better not have lost my flash drive. I have a lot of very important information on there. Ah, good. There we go. Apparently that port's just going bad, which wouldn't actually surprise me. Alright, a friend of mine and I came up with a bit of a list for some games to recommend for systems in general, according to that earlier question, which I had to skip. Here's the list, in no particular order whatsoever. The Wild Arms series, the Xenosaga series, all the Final Fantasies, all the Dragon Quests, Kingdoms of Amalur, Star Ocean 4, the Last Story, Xenoblade Chronicles, Arc Rise, all of the Zeldas on the Wii. Let's see what else we got here. All the Tales of, if you happen to be into that kind of thing. They're kind of generic RPGs, but they are good ones. Let's see here. Baton Kaitos is another one. The Ateller stuff. I don't remember what system that's on. The Fragile Dreams is another good game. Ni no Kuni is coming out soon. That's going to be pretty cool. Grandia, of course. Nier is pretty good. The Dot Hack games, there are 7 of those. That's not a game I never got a series I never got into personally, but a friend of mine does recommend it rather strongly. Dragon's Dogma, of course, is coming out soon. Skies of Arcadia, and finally, and the Kingdom Hearts series, and Shadow Hearts, and Suikoden 3, 4, and 5, and of course, Tactics. There's the list right there in a nutshell. Okay, let's go ahead and get my mouse plugged back in here, so I can go back down to the list of Q&A. There we go. Alright, so, next question here. Will you be doing a Darksiders review? If so, when you first started playing it, did it feel like a bad God of War clone? And later, when you realized it was actually an awesome Zelda clone, did you have that same feeling? Darksiders is another example of a game that I think is a good way to do nothing original, basically. It doesn't have to be original to be good, in other words. It was not an original game. However, it was very fun, it was very enjoyable, and I did very much like Darksiders. I even enjoyed the story, believe it or not. So, I wouldn't mind doing a Darksiders review, but at the moment that seems a little less likely than normal, but I will go ahead and put it on the list. Could you do a Homeworld 1 and 2 review? Yes, I could, and I would like to do that. Will you ever do a review of the Cossacks game? No, I cannot speak to that to the level of expertise as much as I would like to in order to do so. What are your thoughts on Hammond from Jurassic Park? I'm not sure what to make of that question. It could be referring to the Hammond from the book or the Hammond from the movie, which are two very different characters. I'm going to go ahead and say from the movie because I'm slightly more familiar with that one right now off the top of my head. I thought Hammond was the kind of individual that is ultimately not a bad person, but more immature than he otherwise would seem to be, and has no idea how real life works. And I don't mean that in the sense that he was cloning dinosaurs. I mean the way he was doing it and the way he was presenting himself, the illusionary take on the movie. So it's an interesting character, not one I would want to meet personally unless, under certain circumstances. But either way, I did like Hammond as a character, in both the book and the movie, I might add, and I thought that was pretty well done, all things considered. What are your thoughts on the dragons from Skyrim as characters, not enemies? I think they are interesting, especially given the fact that they do bother to expand on their culture a little bit and their society. The whole might makes right literally concept and the inherent need to dominate, as most properly exemplified by Paarthurnax, who spends every day fighting his innate desires. And I just think they were interesting. I thought they were well fleshed out and an excellent touch to the Elder Scrolls series. And probably the best way they could have done dragons in Elder Scrolls. You've mentioned Total Annihilation several times. I've done that today, too. Will you be doing a review, and if so, did you play its expansion Core Contingency? I would love to do a review of Total Annihilation, and yes, I do consider Core Contingency part of the Total Annihilation games. I loved both. Very excellent games. What kind of RTS player are you? This is referring to strategy style. I tend to be very adaptive. I don't have any particular strategy I default to, except for one, but I'll get into them in just a moment. I tend to play basically what is necessary for the circumstances and what is necessary of the moment without a particular long-term plan in mind. This is one of the reasons I was so good at RTS back when I was still playing competitively, both in Starcraft, in Warcraft 2, and in Warcraft 3, was because I was so adaptive that they couldn't actually do anything to me that I didn't already know and was immediately working to counteract, if you follow what I mean here. And by playing effectively on the defensive, but mostly on the offensive in that style, tend to work very well for me. The only exception to this is when I'm playing just for fun and not actually to win, especially not against another player if I'm playing against the AI. I tend to play in what I call the role-playing style, where rather than playing a game to win, I am playing a squad in an area that's trying to claim some territory, if you follow what I mean. And so I will build up a base, even though some of those buildings are unnecessary, and I will take my time in going up the tech tree, even though I don't need that to defeat the enemy, And I will do this because I'm essentially role-playing rather than just fighting a match, if you follow what I mean, because I tend to enjoy that the most. So I guess if you want to call it in that terms, the kind of RTS player I play is one who's bad, because that is much more difficult to pull off and still win, because I'm basically artificially handicapping myself. But I do still tend to win more often than not, and I find that very enjoyable, so. What are your thoughts on Evil Genius by Elixir Studios back in 2004 and its potential sequel? Have you heard of it? And now that Rebellion has the rights, and what do you expect from it if there will be one? I did like Evil Genius. It was not a game I played as extensively as I thought I was going to, but it was a fun game, and I did play it pretty much for like 3 weeks solid and nothing else when it came out. It was very enjoyable. I just kind of put it down and never went back to it. A proper sequel on that would be awesome, especially if they expanded. What I would love to see is obviously fix a lot of the AI, fix a lot of the inconvenience in the UI and stuff like that, as any modern game should, but really expand on your options of what you can do with your base and how exactly, what kind of missions you can undergo, what kind of things you can invest in. Add new features, like for example, legitimate businesses you can pour your money into that can have returns and actual things like that. Fronts, money laundering, all that sort of thing. It would be really awesome if they really added all that to the series, and I'd really enjoy that. I was just wondering, can you read the Star Wars language Arabesh? As far as I know, I'm the only one that can. No, I cannot. The only language I've ever learned is Klingon, believe it or not. I don't know it anymore, for anyone who's asking, but because I've just lost it over time. Orabesh is one of two languages that if I had the time and the money to devote to it, mostly time, I would actually want to learn, to be completely honest with you. In case anyone's wondering, the other is Elvish from Tolkien, from Lord of the Rings. Oh, goodness. So Blizzard has gone on record in saying that even with Diablo 3 finally resolving the Primeval storyline, the Diablo series itself is far from over. What do you think about the future for Sanctuary? Maybe we'll see a proper RPG in this setting, or will it become like an MMO like everything else? I don't think Diablo 3 is going to go the MMO route. I don't think it would actually work for the setting, and I think Blizzard knows that. And to be perfectly honest, if they were going to do that, they would have instead of Diablo 3, in my opinion. Now, it is also possible, I have to be completely honest, that Titan could be the Diablo MMO, but I don't think that's what's happening. I think the story is going to continue. In fact, I know it is. And they have left us, as I've discussed before, or maybe I haven't actually on these videos, there are three rather major plot hooks that are left. There's Malthael, and the fact that he's just kind of left hanging. We have no idea what's going on with him. The other angel, Inarius, I want to say, who is also an angel who is just kind of MIA, and we have no idea what's going on with him. And I guess actually there's more than 3. So there's Imperius next. Imperius was really built up throughout the course of both the books really, and the pre-story and the little cartoon movie, and of course throughout the game itself, as being someone who is going to be a major component of the plot, and then was just kind of shunted aside. That's still dangling there, and I have a feeling they're going to go somewhere with that. Naturally, of course, we still have Adria, or whatever the heck her name was. Adria? Is that her name? I can't think of her name all of a sudden. Maybe that is it. Anyways, she, of course, is still out and about. Now, I don't think she's going to be a major component of the plot, but she is something that still needs to be wrapped up, and I think she will be a tie-in to another aspect of the plot as it's going on. And finally, and most importantly, there is a lot of hinting that we are going to go and try and save Leah and her soul from the Black Soulstone. And indeed, if anybody was paying attention, the Soulstone itself was not destroyed. The Primeval's body was absorbed into the Soulstone, and the Soulstone kept plummeting, but the Soulstone was still whole. And so it is very likely that we're going to go deal with that in the expansion or any future game. So that's my thought on the matter. You... I guess this is the Barbie game question again. Sorry, I already answered that one, but, you know. Next question. Would you be interested in... now, this gentleman listed specifics, which I'm not going to do here for fear of upsetting any of the YouTube privacy violations or anything like that. However, there is a private WoW server that's going to be set up and maintained soon. I am aware of this, and I'm sure anybody who keeps in the loop on that sort of thing is as well. And what am I... let's see. Would I be interested in it and joining or leading a guild on it? I probably will not be joining it purely because of time. I'll be completely honest. It is purely 100% because of time. I just don't have the time to dedicate to as many things as I want to, and the list is only growing as time goes on, ironically. It does sound awesome. I do approve of it to an extent, as long as it is completely free. You know, there is no attempt to bilk any money out of it, and as long as they're careful with it and don't, you know, violate anything like that. And if I were to join it, I probably would not mind leading a guild. I have actually been a guild leader and a raid leader for the majority of my WoW career, which probably doesn't surprise anyone, to be completely honest. Being someone who is kind of tactically minded to begin with, someone who's good at multitasking, and someone who has no problem using his voice on vent. I used to be a raid leader in all 4 eras of WoW, and... you know, I was the guy who was... my favorite example of this, if you'll forgive me for bragging for just a moment, is I was talking a relatively bad tank. And by relatively bad, I mean he wasn't an idiot. He was just incredibly slow and had the inability to adapt. He's what I call the face tank, where if you give him a job where you tank this guy and you just do that and nothing else, there's no tricks to it, he'll do a pretty good job. He'll live really well, he'll cycle his rotations well, but he had such tunnel vision that he was useless on so many fights. We were fighting Algalon in Ulduar, and it was our last chance to fight him for some reason. I don't remember what was the problem there. And so it got to the point where I went into a separate channel with him on Vent, and I knew the Algalon fight, of course. I know all those fights, still, to this day, very well. And I was the other tank, because I'm a tank in WoW. And I was doing... anyone who knows the Algalon fight knows that the 2 tanks basically are doing diametrically opposed jobs, and then swap off, and then swap off, and then do this the whole fight, right? And it's actually incredibly difficult to pull off that level of coordination. And I had to deal with vent lag, so I had to tell him what he had to do a second from when I'm saying it, so that when he hears it, he could do it in a second, while I was doing the exact opposite job the whole time. And we did down him. We did down Algalon. But that was... whew. So anyways... I'm just saying this to get across the point that I do actually enjoy raid leading, I do enjoy guild leading, and I wouldn't mind doing it again someday. It's just, you know, not in the cards, it seems. Now, do you have a favorite or zero circle of soundtracks, remixes, albums, etc.? And if so, what are they? Now, as I've said before, I don't get into albums, I don't get into artists, I don't get into games so much as I do get into songs. But just to give you an idea of some of the songs that are in my Zero playlist, of which there are 31, we have Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, Final Fantasy Dissidia, Kingdom Hearts 2, Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, Lufia 2, Mega Man 2, Mega Man X4, Mega Man 3, Mega Man Zero 4, Metroid Prime 3, Secret of Mana, Warcraft 2, several of my own songs, and Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. So it's a bit of a variety there, but every one of those songs fits all of the definitions that lists that, and the most any of those have is 2 or 3 songs to themselves. I believe that would be Chrono Trigger actually has the record there for having 3 songs on that list. And someone's messaging me. What do we got here? Okay. Next question. What are your thoughts on the upcoming expansion for Civ 5? I am really excited about it, obviously, because I've already purchased it. I am really looking forward to it. It looks like they're adding quite a bit to the game, and I have actually enjoyed Civ 5 a great deal, and and I am really looking forward to it. Let's just put it that way and summarize. I have nothing but good things to say about it. I love all the features they're adding, and here's hoping. Do you think the retaliation in the case of the Mass Effect 3 ending debacle played a role in the course of action that BioWare is doing, such as maybe they want to get their fan trust back somehow? I've basically answered this question several times in several different ways, but in summary, I think what they are doing is the only thing that is effectively available to them. However, I don't know why they're doing that, if I might be honest. And the reason I say that is anybody like me is not going to forgive BioWare. Even if this DLC that comes out in a few days now is the most amazing thing ever, they will not be forgiven. They will merely no longer be as negative as they were, if you follow what I'm saying. They will still be, better than they were, but I'm not going to be like, oh, all's forgiven, come back. That's not happening because the problem happened in the first place, and I'm not going to be able to forget that. That's just not my personality. So I'm not really sure why it is they're trying to do this, especially since I would put money that this DLC is not going to fix anything, as I've said before. But let's go ahead and move on here and get to the next question here. How do you feel about Diablo 3 as it is now, and what do you think customers could expect in the following months? Do you think that the system will remain a dumbed-down version of Diablo 2, and will Blizzard ignore such comments? My opinions on Diablo 3 are extremely unpopular, as I've said as I've admitted many times. To date, I have had one individual ever actually come to me with complaints about Diablo 3 and did so in an intelligent and, in a proper manner. Actually discussed, okay, here's my problems, here are why, and it was actually engaging having a real discussion with him about that, because so much of what I've heard that is negative about Diablo 3 has not been well reasoned or well thought out or well presented. It has simply been nerd rage, as the gentleman here presents it as. And when I say that, I don't mean he's nerd raging. He actually mentions nerd rage in his question here, because these are the unedited questions here. That being said, I think Diablo 3 is a great game. I've said that before. When I get to my review, I'll say it again. I do think the system will remain more or less as it is. I don't think it's dumbed down from Diablo 2. To be quite frank, I think it is more complicated than Diablo 2. Diablo 2's system only had one thing that was slightly more complicated than Diablo 3, and that was the concept of synergies, which is something they're debating adding in the expansion anyways. So not really sure what to add there. I have to think. Let me put it this way. I have to think about Diablo 3. And Diablo 2 I never had to, not even for a second. It was all simple and relatively easy. Now that is not a bad thing against Diablo 2. I'm just saying I don't get the comment there. And I do apologize if that makes you upset. So let's just move on to the next question. Will you review Homeworld series? I already answered that, but yes, I will try to. It's on the list. What do you think of Final Fantasy XIV 2.0? Do you think it will pay off? Will it be forced to go free to play, or will it just die? Final Fantasy XIV was one of those games that I was really, really, really hoping would be awesome. I was right there in the front line. I was ready to go. Me and several of my friends, we were all, we're planning. We were like, okay, this is what we're going to play. This is how we're going to play it. We're going to start on this character. And when we got into the game, it was so absolutely mundanely, terribly bad that we all abandoned it within a week. The only one who stayed a whole week was me, actually. I really wanted to give that game a chance, and it was awful. And I have been idly watching everything they've been doing for 2.0, and I have not been liking what I've been seeing. and that is the kindest thing I can say about that. And I do not think it is going to go anywhere, especially since most of the people who want to play a Final Fantasy MMO are either people like me, who aren't going to get the game they want, or people who are playing FF11 who are playing FF11. Again, not a bad thing. It's just, they've already got a game. Why would they upgrade to FF14 when they've already got 11 and it's fine? I think it is more likely that the game will be shut down after being set free to play, but that's just my opinion on the matter. Did I watch and enjoy the Jurassic Park films? If so, what do you think should be in the new fourth film that is supposed to come out? Do you think large aquatic reptiles should be in it? Or how about prehistoric mammals? I enjoyed Jurassic Park 1 a lot, actually. It's considered one of those movies I enjoy rewatching even to this day. Jurassic Park 2 I did not like. Jurassic Park 3 I really did not like. But actually I think I'm getting that in reverse, aren't I? Because they blended for me a lot. I do apologize, but I didn't like either of them. But one of them I just liked more, and I don't remember which it was. And I can't even comment any further on that, so I'm just going to stop there. Jurassic Park 4 hopefully will still be awesome, and one of the reasons it should be awesome is one of the things Jurassic Park did so well was tension. It accomplished so much in what is referred to as the Jaws effect, where you build up tension, you build up suspense around the idea that you can't show your antagonist. The shark was almost never seen in Jaws, and yet you could feel its presence, you could feel its impact, and you knew what was going to happen, you knew what was coming. And they did that in Jurassic Park 1 very well, and I would love to see them do that kind of thing again. Most personally exemplified within the shaking of the water. I can't do it here because what they actually had was they had a bass tone that would hit a specific note, and that would make the ripple in the water. But anyways, you get the idea. That would be awesome if they pulled that kind of thing back, in my opinion. As far as what I would like to see in it, aquatic reptiles, would be pretty cool, especially since several of the sharks of the era were gargantuan and horrifying. But we'll see what happens. I would love to see more flying animals as well, personally. Do you think Blizzard will have to retcon WoW in order to make another RTS in the Warcraft universe? No, not at all. I didn't actually fully understand this question at first because I was like, why would they? To be completely honest with you, because WoW has such a singular timeline now, as anybody who's played Cataclysm most especially can tell, the Alliance and the Horde quests in any given zone are not mutually exclusive. They are actually combined. They are two parts of a single storyline. What I mean by that is World of Warcraft has a single storyline as of this point, and it has now been fully solidified and will continue to be so. So whenever they do Warcraft 4, they just continue from that point, and there's no need to retcon or change anything because it's ready to go already. Speaking of which, there's a lot of WoW-related questions here. This gentleman's asking me about Kel'thuzad. Did I think he was really Arthas' friend after Arthas became a Death Knight, or do you think he was just loyal? I do personally think Kel'thuzad was actually Arthas' friend. I do think that that was the closest thing Kel'thuzad had to a comrade, someone who actually cared about him, and he cared about, after both of them became members of the Scourge. And I do think that that was an awesome level of character dynamic between the two. They made very excellent points and counterpoints for each other. But I do think he was actually his friend. Who would you say was the most sympathetic? Sylvanas, Kael'thas, Arthas, or Illidan? And in what order? That's a difficult one. For this, we're going to have to assume that Illidan, as he is portrayed in Burning Crusade, and only in Burning Crusade, doesn't exist. We just have to eject that, okay? That being said, I would go ahead and say Illidan would be the most sympathetic, followed by Arthas, followed by Kael'thas, and last Sylvanas. That is just my opinion, of course, and there are several reasons why, but to summarize in brief, Illidan always struck me as someone who tries to do good, doesn't know how to. Arthas tried to do good, failed, recognized it, and then recovered from it, in my opinion, of course. Kael'thas was someone who had the exact same problem as Arthas and went the other path with it. And of course, finally, we have Sylvanas, who was someone who was not exactly a good person to begin with, and things only went bad for her from there. She was still very much a victim, let's be honest here, but I think she called a little bit more of it onto herself than she would probably be willing to admit. More questions here. Would you be willing to go more in depth about Sylvanas, and why do you think she will become a villain? And this gentleman asks because he doesn't have the patience to read the novels or short stories. To summarize a lot. Sylvanas has basically replaced the Lich King in terms of villainous style, except Sylvanas is a lot more dangerous for a lot of reasons. Number one, Sylvanas is not bound to anything. The Lich King, in all of his aspects and all of his incarnations, was bound to the crown and the sword, and Sylvanas is not bound to anything except for Valkyr. Sylvanas also has the ability to come back several times thanks to the pact she has with her Valkyr. Sylvanas also has gotten to the point now where she is accepting things that are horrible and unpleasant and nightmarish purely for the sake of expediency rather than because it is a tactical advantage. Sylvanas has started growing less and less caring, not just about her victims, but about her own subjects. Sylvanas has gotten to the point where she, as mentioned several times in one of the short stories, where she doesn't actually care what happens to the Forsaken, but she herself is interested in spreading her own power now, and as such will use them as tools rather than her people, and so forth and so on. There are a lot of different things that have coming together that are really showing Sylvanas as much more of a villain than an anti-hero or a protagonist or anything like that. Next question. How do you feel about Kael'thas and Illidan stories, and why you wish they changed them, and how would you change them, and if they stay in their beliefs or count as heroes? I do like both stories, again, ejecting the Illidan problem from Burning Crusade. I do wish they changed them at least a little bit, mostly with regards to Burning Crusade. In Burning Crusade, Kael'thas went from being a tragic, interesting warrior hero figure who was a tragic villain, but was much more an anti-hero than he was a villain, even unto the end there. However, in BC, what they did was they took him and turned him into a completely stereotypical raving madman, and I quote, "You will all drown in your own blood." That is not the quote that fits Kael'thas, in my opinion. Now, yes, there is a reason for that. He was actually mentally dominated and controlled by Kil'jaeden. However, I wish they hadn't gone that direction with it. Similarly, Illidan went from being one of the most well-developed and interesting characters in the series, period. Arguably, I'd say the third most interesting character in the entire series, period. And they turned him into a boss with like 5 lines and no dialogue to him at all and hardly any characterization, and he just became a raving lunatic who was insane and who was just out to do really stupid things for stupid reasons, you know. None of his actions in BC made sense unless you looked at him as though he had just suddenly flipped a switch in the back of his mind and said, "Oh yeah, I'm stupid evil now." And I do emphasize stupid evil, not just evil. It was just such a miscarriage of the character, and it really should not have been done in that way. But moving on. I don't know if you still play or not, but what are your opinions on Garrosh Hellscream and your thoughts of Blizzard making... I, of course, cannot stand Garrosh. Never have been able to, all the way since back in Outland, when you first encounter him for the first time. However, I do think Garrosh is an interesting character. I do think he was a necessary character, if nothing else because we needed to see the extreme of what the Horde was on the one side. Thrall was the extreme on what the Horde aspired to be. Cairn was as well, for that matter. You know, we are still warriors, but we are warriors who are good people, who are noble, who are peaceful, who are willing to talk, who are willing to negotiate. Garrosh is the opposite extreme. All of the negative qualities of the Horde could be summarized by saying Garrosh Hellscream. And whilst not everything that has been done that he has done has been directly his fault, he has never actually tried to put out the olive branch, so to speak, or make amends or fix anything. He has only ever gone along with the flow, and so he's become very easy to manipulate. And put simply, I'm really looking forward to killing that bastard. Next question. Oh, where is it? Lost my place here. Will you be doing a review of Starcraft? Yes, I'll be doing a Starcraft review, as I've said 3 times now. Could you give an in-depth review of the story of Carrigan? No, I'm not going to go ahead and... That would take a long time, and there is a lot to talk about Carrigan and her... and everything she went through. However, I will say that Carrigan was an extremely well-done character. That was one of the first true plot twists I'd seen in a video game. And when I say true plot twist, I mean the kind that I didn't see coming at all. The kind that came out of absolutely nowhere and really shocked me and completely upset the status quo and in an awesome way, and I loved it. And there's a lot I could say about that, and if and when I ever get to my StarCraft review, I'll go on that in more depth. In a scenario in which Arthas had not picked up Frostmourne, what do you think would have happened and events later on, and what would have become of the sword? Honestly, I don't think that would have changed much, especially by that point. The Ner'zhul as the Lich King had his hooks too deeply into Arthas, and even if Arthas had finally resisted in the end or taken his own life, Ner'zhul would simply have found another tool. And he would have done so for the same reasons he did with Arthas. And that plan had been in motion for several years at that point. In fact, I think like a decade at that point. I don't think it really would have changed anything, with one big exception, and that is the fact that Arthas, as I've said before, I personally think died a hero, as in he, as someone I believe asked me in detail later. And so I think the reason we managed to defeat the Lich King was because of Arthas. Specifically Arthas, and I do believe that if someone else had become the Lich King, it would have been someone with much lesser will, much lesser ability to withstand and ability to do everything Arthas did within the confines of the horrors that is the Lich King's existence. And so I think the Lich King would have won. Next question. Out of the different leaders of the different races in WoW, who are your favorite and most hated, and would you follow who would you follow without hesitation, and who you think will still be alive at the end of WoW? My favorite leaders would be Thrall and Jaina, without question or hesitation. Cairn would be next after that, and then probably Vol'jin. And I can't think of his name. The original Dwarven King I liked a lot, not the one who's there now, but the original one, the one who's currently in Diamond. I can't think of his name. Well, I'm retarded. As far as who I would follow without hesitation into battle, there's only one who would qualify as that, and that is Thrall. And yes, I know Thrall isn't technically a leader anymore, but he does qualify in my opinion. Which ones do I think will still be alive at the end of WoW? That's a good question. I'm not going to place bets on that one. All bets are off at this point. The war is actually getting worse, and something's going to happen in MOP that's really going to upset everything. Finally, who is my most hated? Ironically, you may say it's Garrosh Hellscream immediately, but the two leaders I hate the most are completely tied. Both of them are exactly hated as much as another, and that is Garrosh Hellscream and Varian Wrynn. I wish both of them would die, and I can't wait to kill Garrosh, and I hope they give me a chance to kill Varian, because those two people need to go away. Next question. Whatever happened to Sargeras, and do you think we'll ever see Queen-Ashara? Sargeras in lore technically is not actually corporeal or indeed capable of being it right now, thanks to what happened to him while he was inside Medivh. That's actually kind of a complicated story, but long story short, he could come back if they wanted to bring him back, and they might, but it's also in the type of circumstance where if they chose never to come him back, he'll never come back. The option exists both ways. Both ways make perfect sense. So he's in limbo, more or less literally at the moment. As far as Queen-Ashara in her true form, it would be nice to see her as she really is now, especially since they gave her a completely unique model for one instance, which I thought was really cool, actually. But seeing the modern Ashara would be awesome, and I do think that is going to happen at some time in the future. Oh, hey, I think we're out of WoW questions here. How do you feel about them taking away certain skills, such as unarmed athletics, etc., and stats that run Oblivion away from Skyrim? I was torn on that for a while, but I do think they did it for the right reason, personally. I think that that was a good choice overall, and allowed them to focus more on the talent system, with the stars in the sky thing, rather than focusing on your individual skills in such a in a manner that they usually did. So I think overall it was a good choice. However, I would prefer if they had left something that was basically athletics and acrobats combined. That's just me, though. As I replay the game of Dragon Age 2, I think the Hollywood vibe on combat is intended as another exaggeration of Varric's storytelling, considering the overtop sequences he weaves into the tale. Thoughts? I wish we had seen more of those. I remember the one where you walk in and you're just destroying everything and everything. Oh my gosh! And all this epicness is happening, and all this, and Cassandra interrupts him and saying, "You're elaborate. You're embellishing." And he's like, "God, I'm just trying to make it interesting." That was awesome. I love that scene. I think you're right. But when I say that, what I think is what happened is the people in charge of the money said, we need you to Hollywoodize this game, and the story writers thought of a reason to make that work. In my opinion, that is why Varric exists as the framing device for the story, is that reason right there. And that's another point in Dragon Age 2's favor, I might add, is that fact. I do believe that that is why that came to be. That's just my opinion, but I do agree with you, basically, is what I'm saying here. Have I ever played Okami? Yes, I have. I'm probably not going to pick up the remake that's coming out soon because I have the original. But I'll tell you one thing, the Okami game on the DS, which is technically a sequel, awesome game, and really works well with the stylus. I'd recommend it for anyone who's into the Okamis or anything like that. What are your thoughts on the character of Gollum or Smeagol? Now, as with any Lord of the Rings character, I could spend a lengthy period of time talking about them. In summary, I think it was a very excellently, beautifully designed character that grew and changed and moved and then regressed throughout the series basically perfectly, and I have nothing bad to say about it at all, and I'm going to summarize it with there. I have recently started playing Baldur's Gate, but it's a bit hard for me. Can I skip straight to 2, or will that completely ruin everything? Yes, you can skip straight to 2. It will not ruin everything. There's only a few tidbits in 1 that actually matter in 2 directly. There are several, but you will get the gist of it as time goes on. It's not a big spoiler. This gentleman asked me about several animes and my thoughts on them. Cowboy Bebop, didn't like it. Ghost in the Shell, I liked the concept, but I never liked the execution. Full Metal Alchemist, did not like it, primarily because the whole way they present alchemy really bothered me for some reason. I can't really explain why. Dragon Ball, don't actually have anything bad to say about that. It was amusing. I do think that they should have originally ended the story when it was originally supposed to be ended. Death Note. Death Note is one of the few animes I do actually enjoy to an extent. I do think Light Yagami is one of the more evil characters in fiction ever. L is certainly interesting in his own right, you know, blah blah blah. One Piece. I never actually liked One Piece, but I know a great deal about it. One Piece is too ridiculous for me, and I don't have a better word for that. I don't mean that as a bad thing. It seems so out of bounds and so bizarre and so ridiculous. I don't have a better word for it, and so it never actually caught me because of that. Next question. So you studied Greek history. How did it come to this? I believe this gentleman was asking me why I studied Greek history, and unfortunately, and for reasons I cannot elaborate upon, this is one of those questions I'm not going to answer because it is too personal. I do apologize. However, there is a rather personal and deep reason why I started getting into Greek and Greek history, and I cannot elaborate on it. Now, what this question is asking about the unethical reward system that Jonathan Blow mentioned, the designer of Braid, and how he bashed World of Warcraft for that system, and how he claims that a lot of games reward you based on meaningless action, giving you a false sense of accomplishment. Now, I personally disagree with him because I think the definition of false accomplishment is something that needs to be defined a little bit better by the individual and is not a universal constant. I personally, to be completely frank, do think certain things in WoW that I have done are accomplishments, and I have nothing wrong with trying to reward people and make them feel good about themselves for playing a game, because Lord knows the rest of reality doesn't do enough of that, in my opinion. So I generally disagree with him, but he does have some interesting points, and anybody who feels like reading that, I do recommend it, actually. This gentleman recently came across the Deadlands tabletop setting, and his tabletop group wants to break it out, although none of them know anything about it. Do you recommend it, and if so, do you have any suggestions for starting campaigns in Homebrew Rules? I don't like Deadlands personally, but it makes for very excellent gameplay when you're going for that kind of reverse RPG format, as I've just discussed before. I guess survivalist horror would be a good way to put that as well. As far as starting campaigns, just do something very simple and let it expand from there. I can't even, I would have to really think about it to come up with a plot hook for that setting off the top of my head, so I'm afraid I can't help you with that one right now. As far as Homebrew Rules, I actually just never actually used anyone that one other than the automatic skimping of the dice. For example, if one of my guys just attacked one of the player characters and hit them for triple their HP, I'll usually flinch the dice so that it doesn't kill him, depending on the circumstances. But that's all I've got for Deadlands. Next question. If you could create your own world and do whatever, and effectively be the god of this world, what would it be like and who would inhabit it, and would you demand anything from your creations, and would you have free will or complete control, and would you fix any mistakes? First of all, I probably would prefer not to create such a world, to be completely honest with you. However, let's go ahead and answer the questions. What would it be like? I have no idea. It would be a world, I mean, because I have designed many worlds, whole settings, whole cultures, whole existences and societies and civilizations in the course of my writing career, I guess you could call that. But as far as what it would be like, I would probably make it as self-efficient as possible, designed in every facet so that nothing is wasted within reason, and that there is plenty of room for growth and opportunity and freedom of choice. Um, who would inhabit it? I have no idea. Probably humans, to be just completely honest. I'd be like, hey, you want to come to my planet? It's nice. Here's what it's like. Here's a brochure. As far as would I demand anything from my creations? Absolutely not. I disagree with that concept in every single facet of it. And so, no, I would not demand a single thing from anything I designed or built or created, as you put it. I would believe in free will as opposed to complete control. And as far as fixing mistakes, that depends. Mistakes has to be defined for that one. So let's just say if something happens where the world was destroyed, or if something happens that the inhabitants of this world were unable to fix themselves, which I believe is the key point, then yes, I would step in order to help them. Otherwise, I would leave them to their own devices within reason. Again, not an absolute. In order to encourage them to live and grow and be themselves and have freedom of will. Next question. Are you a brony? No, I am not a brony. I have nothing against people who are bronies and who watch that show, whose name I can't even think of right now. But no, I am not a brony. I've never had interest in it. I did try to watch the first episode, an emphasis on the word try. It didn't catch me. I had to turn it off. What do you think about the change from unlimited ammo in Mass Effect 1 to limited ammo in Mass Effect 2 and 3, both from a gameplay and from an in-game logical perspective? The gameplay perspective made perfect sense to me. It actually was something I thought should have been in Mass Effect 1 initially. That being said, the in-lore explanation was ridiculous, poor, and stupid, and the fact that they make fun of that in the games probably highlights that. I'm going to give them a pass on it, because they do make fun of it and they acknowledge how silly it is, but, it is still something that probably should have just been there to begin with and live with that. Which pen and paper games do you play, and which is your favorite? Which is your favorite? Do you prefer to be a player or a game master? I prefer D20, and I say that specifically because D&D is simply too limiting. But I do prefer D20 as a general system. Cyberpunk is fun. GURPS is fun. That's basically all of my favorites right there, those three. As far as whether I prefer to be a player or a game master, I much prefer to be a GM. I don't actually like playing D&D all that much, and this is going to sound weird, but the reason why is because I don't know anyone who GMs like I do. And I prefer that my GM to be the dynamic holodeck setting type thing, the guy who can keep track of everything and adapt to everything, and I have total freedom in how I play that game, rather than what most people do, which is either railroading you or basically using a module straight from a book. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but that's not what I enjoy playing, and so I don't generally like playing D&D. Next question. Imagine you could choose any job in the world. Which job would you take? I'm going to go ahead and assume realistic job here, as opposed to I want to be independently wealthy or I want to be in charge of my own mega corporation, which would be the first two, by the way. But realistically speaking, the gentlemen who work on Top Gear, that's the United Kingdom's Top Gear with Richard Hammond, James May, and Jeremy Clarkson, I would love their job. I mean that sincerely. I would love to have that job a lot. Even with all the hardships and difficulties they go through, that would be so worth it. The other type of job I would not mind is something similar to the gentleman with No Reservation, I believe is the name of the show, or Man vs. Food. Now the catch is, I wouldn't do it the same way Man vs. Food does, because I don't want to take the food challenges. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not that big. But I would like to, the ability to just go across the country and sample different food types and unusual food types and to share. And the key point here from both of these jobs, if you're paying attention, is both of these jobs are about people who are enthusing about something they love. I have often said, and this is something that a friend and I actually tossed about as a serious idea, some way of making enthusing about video games into a real job, like Top Gear, like Man vs. Food, like any of those shows of that manner, because that's my thing. Video games are the fourth most important thing to me, and it's something that I genuinely enthuse about. It's something I want to share that enthusiasm with, and I would love to do a show about that. Kind of like I do right now, but more so. Next question. Do you think Rome Total War revolutionized that type of strategy genre, or would you go all the way back to the original Shogun Total War? And do you think the next Total War game will be Rome 2? And can you review Rome Total War? I can review Rome Total War. I don't think they'll do a Rome 2. I think they'll go with something else. I hope they'll go with something in one of the eras they haven't covered yet, because there are several. As far as which one revolutionized it, I would probably go ahead and put the credit to Shogun Total War. That type of combination strategy and grand strategy worked really well for them, and I liked it. Have you ever played any of the Sims games? Yes, I have. I didn't like Sims 1 that much, and I really never got into Sims 2, but something about Sims 3 really clicked with me. I do actually still play Sims 3 every now and again when I'm in the mood, both cheating and non, for completely different reasons, which I'm not going to go into. Next question. I talked about Spore and how much I enjoyed playing it. Assuming the answer to question 1, which is the Sims question, is yes, which of these two games do you think best exemplifies the concept of life simulation game? I would still go ahead and say Sims 3 does, because Sims 3 is so much more life simulation than Spore. Spore is much more everything. And free sandbox, arcade game, first-person shooter, real-time strategy, civilization-based, and empire building all in one, and exploration-based. And I think as far as just plain life simulation, Sims 3 takes the cake there. Next question. Do you think it would be possible to make certain video games more informative, primarily but not exclusively in an academic sense, or would that mar the entertainment value? Now, I do think that is something that is possible and feasible. The gentleman then goes on to mention the Assassin's Creed series and how Assassin's Creed does kind of help educate in certain ways about history and about certain periods of history. Now, I do personally think that is something that could be done more and well, and that's really the important part, because so many games, especially in the my goodness, in the late 80s, early 90s, were trying to do the educational games, and they were all terrible. They were just garbage, you know. Mario is Missing is a beautiful example of a game that was just bad, that was trying to be educational. You can do that sort of thing and be educational. You can do that sort of thing and be informative. You just have to make the game good. And so I do think that is something that they should and indeed could do more. The catch is, as ever, money, because there's not a lot of money in education, and so finding the kind of funding to make a good game, like the Assassin's Creed series, which still is informative, especially in the academic sense, is extremely unlikely. Next question. What do you think of Alan Wake? It's a Stephen King thing. No, in all honesty, I've never liked Stephen King, so I just kind of didn't get into that at all. And one of my friends who actually is into Stephen King and likes horror as a genre in general, told me not to bother. And if he doesn't like it, I'm probably not going to like it. So that's all I have to say on there. Dungeon Siege 3. I do actually own Dungeon Siege 3. I still haven't played it. I've been waiting for a time when me and my friend who also bought it are going to play through it. So don't have anything to actually say there yet. I did buy it, so, you know, there's that. Scroll down a bit. In Skyrim, what did you think of Paarthurnax as a character, and did you side with the Greybeards or with the Blades? I thought Paarthurnax was a fascinating character, and he himself asks a beautiful question, which is intended to make the player think. Who do you consider to be, this is paraphrased, who do you consider to be more good? Someone who is innately good, or someone who fights their evil nature on a daily basis, which is what Paarthurnax does. I liked Paarthurnax. I honor him. I can say that I respect him as a character. He is a character who really did try to be better than he was, and I think that worked out really well. And naturally, as you might imagine, I sided with the Greybeards, and the Blades can go screw themselves. I'm not killing Paarthurnax. Sorry, I don't care what you guys say. In all honesty, I couldn't even think of a reason why I would. He's a dragon is not a reason enough for me. I'm sorry, I'm not that racist. Or speciest, I suppose that would be. Oh, goodness. Next question. Will you be able to review Civ 5 and or FF9? FF9, as with all the FFs, is on the list. Civ 5 is on the list as well. Star Wars Battlefront. I can't do a review about that game, but it was a good game. It was an interesting game. It's just good down here, if I'm completely honest with you. I think they should have done more with it. If they do make a third game, that would be awesome, and I think that would be very well received. Did you ever play Star Wars Republic Commando, and what did you think of it? I did play that, and I thought that was a much better game. I thought there needed to be more of that, and again, they need to do a sequel to that and do it properly, because that would be awesome. Do I think Anakin would have turned to the dark side if Qui-Gon was his master instead of Obi-Wan? Yes, I do, but primarily because the forces arrayed against Anakin in him turning to the dark side and moving him towards that path were so massive, so significant, and so widespread that I don't think Anakin ever had a chance to not turn to the dark side. In my personal opinion, he was completely locked in and, put it frankly, screwed from day one. From the moment he was born, he was planned to be this thing, and I don't think there's anything he could have done about it, he or anyone else. Next question. Do you feel Tim, the elusive man, was mishandled or misused in Mass Effect 3? Would you have wrote him differently if you were in charge? Give the player the option to rejoin Cerberus and the elusive man if your Shepard had made the necessary choices in Mass Effect 2. Yes, I believe he was mishandled. Yes, I would have written him differently. Yes, I would have given you the choice to rejoin him. I'm not going to go into detail here, but suffice it to say, I think the elusive man should never have been indoctrinated. I think leaving him as the anti-Shepard would have been much more interesting of a character piece than turning him into what they did, you know. And that's all I'm going to say about that one. Next question here. Are there any games or games from companies you still consider automatic buys besides games by Bethesda? Yes, sort of. And by yes, sort of, I mean, I guess technically no. But there are several game companies that still do have my trust. I'll still look into these games, but the odds of me buying them are much higher. These game companies are Blizzard, who, aside from a few missteps, could be completely frank, have not let me down. Not in the long term, at least. Nintendo, and I mean games actually made by Nintendo, because those games tend to be awesome. And that's it. So, next question here. Let's see. And I suppose the Kingdom Hearts games, at least at the moment, Square Enix is not an automatic buy. They haven't been for years. But the Kingdom Hearts series, so far, has only disappointed me once. And they are technically in my look into it and then probably automatically buy list. So I'll go and mention those as well. Do you play shooters? Yes, I do. Not as much as I used to, but I used to be very good at them. If you do you prefer first or third-person shooters, and do you use controller or keyboard and mouse? I prefer first-person, and I prefer keyboard and mouse. I was very good in the Unreal Tournament age, and the subsequent era immediately following that. And I was... Oh, God, I love that game, and I was really good at it. I was really good at... turning, even though most people tend to have an issue with that and use the trackball instead, but I never had that problem. I was very good at it, and I loved it. And I guess I should just go ahead and move on here to the next question, because I still have a lot to get through, and I'd like to finish this tonight. What is your opinion on the sci-fi scroller adventure Another World, sometimes referred to as Out of This World, depending on your nation, and Flashback from the early 90s? I thought Out of This World, or Another World, was awesome, was an incredibly brilliant, well-designed, amazing game. And I will never put it above good, though. And part of the reason why is because that was a very severe example of artificial difficulty, not real difficulty. And I can't even say that game made you think, because it would punish you for things you don't know, or punish you for things you can't know. It was very much a game made for save states, except save states didn't exist at the time, so yeah. Fun game, though, and definitely deserves its props. Flashback I never actually played, so I can't actually comment on that one. What would be your top 5 point-and-click adventure series for new players to start with? Adventures of Monkey Island, any of the old Indiana Joneses. There were several back in the old PC in like the 90s there. The Day of the Tentacle, I'd go ahead and put Grim Fandango on that list. Oh, what else? Let's go ahead and say Maniac Mansion as the last one. Except... I suddenly can't remember if Maniac Mansion and Day of the Tentacle are the same game with different titles. It's been a little while, as you can imagine. Let's just go ahead and leave the list at that and move on. But I would recommend all of those. Very, very good games. Very enjoyable games. Do you think Kratos from God of War is a strong or weak character, and is he appropriate or an inappropriate anti-hero character? I do think he is a strong character, and I don't mean physically. I do think there is a great deal of willpower behind him. The unwillingness to stop, the unwillingness to quit. And that's actually really cool, because every time they show him giving up for just a moment, it does actually come across as an interesting... the impact of the moment is not lessened, because he just never gives up, except for, now. And now it's like, that being said, I do think he's a very appropriate anti-hero character. I do sympathize with Kratos more than not. And him Let's just say the more nihilistic side of me agrees with Kratos, and let's just leave it at that. Did you ever watch the Mega Man cartoon series from the mid '90s? Yes, I did for like a few episodes, and then I realized it was absolutely nothing like Mega Man, at least not as I had it up here, and so then I stopped watching the series. Were there ever plans to make a Sonic 3? Sonic Adventures 3. Not that I'm aware of, which is such a shame because I would very much like to see a Sonic Adventure 3. However, there is always hope for another one because that series is still going, and so, fingers crossed here. Mass Effect questions. As you were a soldier, what was your favorite weapon and heavy weapon from Mass Effect 2? Oh, goodness. I can't think of the name of it. It was the one that was a burst weapon, and it would shoot 3 bursts, and 3 bursts. It was a very thin, tall weapon. I have no idea what it was called. I suppose I could look it up really quick while I'm thinking about this. As far as my favorite heavy weapon from Mass Effect 2, that's easy, the Collector Beam. There was no question about that one at all. Hang on just a second here as I look this up. Gosh darn it. Weapons, weapons, weapons. But the heavy particle beam, or what it was called, the collector weapon, was simply too useful to not use extensively in Mass Effect 2, and it was also the one I was the best at because I could do extended fire and I'm very accurate with my aiming, and so that worked out for me. Oh goodness. Oh surely. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Assault rifles. Sorry for about the delay, people. I'm just want to get this done and over with. Okay. The gun I used is apparently one that I can't see because I am mentally deficient. There it is. The M15 Vindicator would be the gun I used. Which is funny because I can't stand that gun in Mass Effect 3. Go figure, I suppose. Moving on. What is your favorite music track from the Mass Effect series? The Suicide Mission from Mass Effect 2, no question. I listen to that every now and again just because I feel like it. I love that song. There's so much emotion and strength and power and defiance in that song. I love it. Next question. What is your favorite mission or side mission from each Mass Effect game? As far as Mass Effect 1, I would say Vermeer definitely qualifies. Not just for many reasons. The Wham episode of it, the death of your teammate, the revelation of Sovereign. It was a very well designed, very well executed mission. In Mass Effect 2, the suicide mission itself would of course be my first choice. Barring that, I would go ahead and say Morden's loyalty mission, which I found very interesting and very enjoyable, and really loved going through. Let's see, past that, Mass Effect 3. I guess I'm just gonna go ahead and default to the Tachanka mission. Tachanka. Or is it Tachanka? I can't remember. The mission, where you go to the Krogan Homeworld, and that was just crowning moment of glory of awesome there. Next question. Do you feel, as I do, that BioWare never made a proper defense of the Mass Effect 3 ending? I have said this many times, and I think I'm going to start making a rule. I'm never going to answer questions about Mass Effect 3 ending again, because there's nothing else to be said. Everything that has been asked of me, I've already answered. But I don't want to sound mean, so I'm going to go and answer this. This is the last one. Yes, I do think that they failed. I don't think they ever actually made a proper defense. I think they basically pointed the blame back at us and then said, okay, fine, we'll meet you halfway because we're the good guys here. Didn't like that at all. Who do you think is the most underrated character in the Mass Effect series? That's a toughie because a lot of them receive a lot of attention in a lot of different ways. I would probably go ahead and say Jack, personally, who was a very interesting, very well-developed character, and I really had a lot of sympathy and empathy for. And I liked Jack, so, let's see. How do you think the Mass Effect 3 ending debacle will affect the careers of Casey Hudson and Mac Walters? I don't think it's going to affect them at all. There are too many times in gaming history, even with an event as big as this one, where someone has had this horrible thing happen and their name is tarred in the mud, but it doesn't matter to the developers and it doesn't matter to the publishers, and so they don't care. And so they'll go ahead and either get another job elsewhere or they will simply stay in the job they're at and it won't affect them at all, basically. Next question. Have you heard about the reboot of the Ninja Turtles movie being halted for the time being? Yes, I have. And if why it was stopped, that's a good question. There's actually been a lot of rumor milling about that. I honestly have no idea why that was stopped. If I were to guess, I would say that someone stepped in with trademark rights or creative control and said no, and so they're working that out for it to be able to continue. What do you think of Grand Theft Auto 5's marketing scam going on? This one confused me for a moment, but he mentions that they revealed it in October, they had a trailer in November, and then we haven't heard anything since. I personally think that is one of two ways you can do advertising correctly. The other way would be, we have a game coming out, it's coming out in a month, which is what I prefer. Bethesda tends to lean towards that way. Oh, by the way, this game's coming out in a year, you know, the end. But it is a type of marketing that basically says, we're making a new game. And then they're not going to say anything else until the new game is ready to come out. And I don't have any actual problem with that personally. It's more like, you know, by the way, guys, I'm working on this. No deadline, no TBA. And then I walk away, and when it's finally done, I come back and say, "Yep, it's ready." You know, it's just there so that you know I'm working on it, kind of a thing. So it doesn't actually bother me. Now, of course, I could be misreading this, but what are your thoughts on day one DLCs? Completely depends on the circumstances. It literally 100% depends on the circumstances as to whether or not I am for or against or in favor of or tolerate or accept day one DLCs. So I can't answer that in any level of specificity because it really does depend, you know. It depends on the development time, it depends on the circle, it depends on how much effort was put into the day one DLC. It depends on if the day one DLC was something that should have been in the main game, or if it actually feels like a proper DLC. You know, it depends. So I can't comment on that more specifically. Have you ever played Battle for Middle-earth? I actually already answered that, I'm sorry. But yes, I have, and yes, it's a good game. I do recommend it. What do you expect in a DLC for Morrowind and Cyrodiil, considering the ground for both provinces has already been made? This is referring to the fact that a lot of this terrain already exists in Skyrim. I would not be surprised to see a DLC that expands Skyrim out into these areas, but I actually don't think that's going to happen. I think what is more likely is that's the Oblivion concept. A, it was there just in case they needed it, and B, it's there for the modders. Do you think if they do a Cyrodiil DLC for Skyrim, they'll add faster Cyrodiilic mounts, such as those horses from Oblivion? Yes, I do, actually, and I think that'd be pretty cool. In Skyrim, there are prehistoric mammals. Do you think any province of Tamriel there are dinosaurs, and if so, which ones? I have no idea. If they were, they would probably be in the Black Marsh, if I were to guess, to be completely honest with you, that whole alien atmosphere area. As far as which ones, probably smaller ones. Campliosaurs. There we go. At least I think I'm saying that right. You know, things like that would be the kind of dinosaurs I'd expect to see there. Nothing too big, nothing too exempt. You know, but something like that. Have you ever played the Romancing Saga series on the SNES? Yes, I have. Excellent games, very hard to find in English, unfortunately, or in any real language. I'm sorry that. In any other language is what I meant to say. As far as any language other than Japanese, because those games were only somewhat or only partially translated to other languages in general. But I do know a friend, for example, who lives in Germany who was having severe difficulties getting hold of a German copy of Romancing Saga, and I'm not sure he ever actually did. So, good series if you can get a hold of it, is what I'm saying there. This gentleman was asking about Garrosh and what my thoughts are on him. He mentioned that he thought Garrosh was hated too much, and too many people disliked him. I personally disliked Garrosh because he as an individual was a horrible person. That being said, he did get results, and it is worth noting that we don't know how long he was under the demonic control of Balnazar, so, you know, or whichever Dreadlord it was. So I'm going to have to go ahead and give him a bit of a pass, but for everything that we are exposed to of Garrosh, he did a horrible job, and it's worth noting that he did fail in his mission. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for the man. Do you think in the next Fallout game they will try or have anything like Dead Money, i.e. survival horror? Yes, I do. As long as they don't overdo it, I think that's a good thing. I think as long as that we do not have an excess and a flood of that kind of gameplay, that it's only a part of the game, such as one DLC like Dead Money, I think that'll work great. And Fallout is also a game setting and system that works really well for doing the reverse RPG element that I have mentioned before in previous videos, so there's some hope there for something like that. This gentleman was telling me about how he, in a kind way, was personally disagreed with my intended ending for Mass Effect 3, and he stated that he thinks sad endings can have more of an impact, and he wants to know my thoughts on this. I do agree that sad endings can have a greater impact if they are done very well. To be completely honest with you, I can't think of an example off the top of my head of a sad ending I actually thought was good, that was well done. But I personally will prefer, in 99% of the cases, a happy ending. some sort, you know. There is also such a thing as a bittersweet ending, which is happy and sad at the same time, and that can be pulled off very well. I can think of several examples of that. So, it depends on how well they do it. I could have seen them doing a sad ending of Mass Effect 3, and it still would have been better, but I personally would have preferred keeping true to the theme and the feeling of Mass Effect of triumphing against insurmountable odds and pulling off the happy ending and earning it, rather than being forced into a corner and picking from three colors. In Skyrim, you can destroy the Dark Brotherhood for the Imperials. Do you think that is correct? Also, do you think you should be able to destroy any other faction, and if so, which faction should you be able to do it so for? I do think that was a correct choice, but only in that specific case, because the Dark Brotherhood, if you'll recall, was already well on its way out. It was already gone, basically. None of the glory, none of the reach, none of the stretch. The Dark Brotherhood had become a joke, and finishing it off is what you're doing. You're not destroying it. You are snuffing out the last candle in the room, you know. And so that made perfect sense. I don't think that would make sense for several of the other factions, which are much more established and much more entrenched, with the exception of the Thieves Guild. I think that if you had the option to tear down the Thieves Guild and finally disband that, that would have also worked. That's just my opinion, though. During the Revolutionary War period, there were not that many old, large, unused buildings that we know of, and the Native Americans didn't make anything that large that we know of. So how do you think Assassin's Creed 3 will pull off the dungeon elements of previous Assassin's Creed games? Sorry, he says AC, and AC automatically equates Asheron's Call to me, always has. In Assassin's Creed 3, I think what we're going to see is something that's going to be awesome. We're going to see a lot of new dungeons and you know the same parkour, awesome jumping puzzle, all that stuff in the terrain, in cliffs, in mountains, in caves, going up a waterfall, going through the woods, trying to reach the top of a tree. There is so much possibility of doing that in the dense forest area and in the woods and in the wilds and in the cliffs, all that. And I think it's going to be absolutely awesome. um, Now there are 4 questions left, and if it's not obvious, I'm really starting to lose concentration. I am very tired. I am very worn out. I have a huge headache, and I'm gonna go ahead and do one more video after this. That's all I have time for tonight. I haven't done so much of my work tonight, but I don't care at the moment. So I will talk to you guys in a moment.